impacts the global PAC when it comes to Africa with regards to, the main supply chains for Apple. Well, despite all of this potential influence, it would appear that once again, the black community is absent from all this announcement. Radio silence, whether it's from black communities within the United States through leadership institutions, I haven't seen anything. Or the African Union on the African continent, nothing at all. So, henceforth, the question, brother, where art thou? Or sister, where art thou? So we will discuss that, discuss the silence, and discuss the impact, but also how to respond with such announcements and how to make sure that our voices are represented. That will be the subject of our discussion today. Fasten your seatbelts. Let's dive in and let's get to work. All right, family, AfriKili family and Global PAC Nation, welcome once again to the Global PAC show presented by Tony Mfumusimba. Always a pleasure for me to come in front of you for our new live format, which is not quite new anymore, right? So it's been over a month now. And so on that note, thank you very much to all of you that are supporting this concept, that have supported us from day one by subscribing to the channel, by viewing, by sharing, by sending me messages. I really, really appreciate that. And for those of you who have not done so yet, let me ask you to please just take a second to click on the subscribe button. Something that will last less than 2 seconds, but will help this platform grow tremendously. Because without you, we cannot do it. But I know that with you in 2025, I have no doubt that we will reach all of the objectives that we've set forth for the Global PAC and AfriKili as a community. So join the community, be part of the conversation. Also remember to check out the website, www.afrikili.com, for some of the blog entries, and also put in your email address so that you can remain connected to our community as we grow. All right, there you have it. All right, so let's dive right into our subject today, which is only one topic, and we'll look at it from a political angle, but also an economic angle, because two of our three pillars within AfriKili and the Global PAC is political action, right? So political organization, but also economics, finances. As I like to say, money talk and BS walks. All right, so the announcement, as you probably saw, or if you did not know, well, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, so visited Donald Trump. And shortly after there were talks and so on, so he announced that Apple would invest $500 billion. That is massive. $500 billion over the next 5 years to increase its manufacturing capacity within the United States, and an estimated about 20,000 jobs that will be created. Well, of course, as you can imagine, from the camp of Donald J. Trump, announcements such as this is what they like, right? Because it's like, yeah, once again, there's a strength of Donald J. Trump, because he said he would increase the tariffs on goods coming from the outside, because he also wanted to incentivize American companies to relocate their manufacturing capacity within the United States. So you can imagine there's a bit of a celebration there. Well, on that note, I would say pump the brakes. All right, guys, let's pump the brakes for a second. Because, if you follow this sort of announcement, this has happened before. As a matter of fact, in 2018, Apple had announced that they would invest somewhere around $350 billion. That was in 2018. And they said it would create about 20,000 jobs. And then about 3 years later, 2021, same type of announcement. Apple announced once again that it would invest, about $400 billion over the next 5 years. Same deal. And now with Donald J. Trump, they've announced again that they will invest about $500 billion over the next 5 years, over the next 4 years. I'm sorry. So that's an average of about what, like $125 billion per year. 500 billions over 4 years. So yeah, I would say pump the brake. This has been done before. It has not necessarily materialized into everything that Apple had announced. But this is definitely music to Donald J. Trump's ear. This is the kind of announcement he's been rejoicing with a lot lately. Nevertheless, this is still not something to underestimate. Apple is massive. We all know Apple from our iPhone. I do not have an iPhone, by the way. For those of you who have iPhones, I've tended to stick with Android from many years, so I tend to be an outlier in my circles. Nevertheless, I'm digressing here. So I'm not an iPhone person. I'm an Android person. Nevertheless, iPhone, nobody's foreign to iPhone. But did you know that in terms of market cap, it is the biggest company, all right, with a market cap of about $3.7 trillion. That is massive. So when we talk about market cap, for those that might not know what it is, just real quickly, market cap simply means market capitalization. Okay, so it's essentially the amount of outstanding, the number of outstanding shares that a company has that are traded in the stock market and so on. So the amount of outstanding shares, and just multiply that by the price of the stock. So right now, I think the Apple stock, I checked it earlier. I think it's in the 430 something dollars, I believe, on the Nasdaq. So you combine the number of shares by the price, and then you multiply that, and you get the market cap. So when you do that, Apple has $3.7 trillion. That is big, but how big is it exactly? I was having fun a few days ago, and just with my kids, try to see if they could understand a trillion. We're talking about trillion. How much is $1 trillion? Quite frankly, it's even hard to fathom. If I was to ask you how many zeros is a trillion, some people might have to take a step back and think, oh, how many zeros is that? 12 zeros? Okay. But what does that even represent? Okay, let's just say it's huge. $3.7 trillion is massive. That's more than the GDP of many nations combined. So all that to say that Apple is not an insignificant company. All right, so when such a company makes such an announcement, it behooves us to stay abreast of such news and just kind of, understand what is happening, especially in the business scene, because that might end up impacting many of our lives. As a matter of fact, let's go straight into it. As I said, I wanted to divide this conversation into two different angles. There's an economic angle and there's a political angle. Let me start with maybe the business angle in terms of the organization, and I'm talking about the Global PAC here. Obviously, our show, the Global PAC show, aims to build bridges and build strong coalitions between the Global PAC, which is what we call the Global Pan-African Communities or Pan-African Coalitions. That's what the PAC is. Some might say it's political affair committees, that's political PACs, not necessarily, but it's essentially Black people and people of African descent around the world. So in that sense, we would love to get to a point where our voices are well represented within the power circles. So we're talking about the United States here. We would love to see stronger representation by institutions that are designed to gather the voices of Black communities. So in the political arena, we have things like the Black Caucus, representative of elected officials. We have institutions such as the NAACP. That's more like civil society, but that played a role of gathering our voices, and many more. When it comes to Africa, obviously, sub-Saharan Africa, with like the majority of people being Black, you would want to see institutions such as like maybe the African Union to be able to organize a bloc and take all the voices together to be able to advocate in places such as that, and really just represent the voice and uplift the interest of the constituents. When it comes to the Caribbean, we have CARICOM, right? Which would love to feel their impact within political circles, so that when announcements are made, so that they can actually influence the way decisions are going. But unfortunately, that is not the case, folks. Let's just be honest. That is not the case. Our voices are severely missing when it comes to being in the circles of power. Now, when I look at the United States, for example, so I really want to use this Apple decision to kind of make the connection, or I'm sorry, this Apple announcement and make the connection with how our lack of political organization ends up impacting us severely, and also obviously have an economic impact on the lives of Black communities, but also Africans and other members of the Global PAC. So let's look at this lack of organization. I was having a conversation once with a friend. Case in point, here we're talking about the DRC. As I've said before, I'm from originally I was born in the DRC. Relocated when I was very young. Ended up spending many years in Europe before relocating to the United States of America. But we're having a conversation, and so my friend was kind of complaining that, okay, so the American foreign policy is having a negative impact on the DRC, because we're talking about the war in the DRC, a war that has gone on for so long, which is fueled by the vast mineral wealth within that country. And so here the complaint was that, well, you have all these multinational and then the US and so on that are really benefiting from all those minerals. You have even Chinese companies and so on. And also almost, I would say, not almost, but complaining that despite that economic interest, well, the US is not doing enough in terms of a political agenda or a foreign policy to really help alleviate the issues on the ground. So, in a sense, it is true, but I tended to be on a different mindset. On this platform, I believe in advancing, not just complaining and pointing the finger. I think I made the point last week on one of the shows too. If it's all about complaining about things, being a victim, that's a waste of time. I'm more into the action part. It's like, okay, what can we actually do? How can we advance? So with regards to that Congolese situation, for example, horrendous war. One might also take the case of Sudan. I mean, in Sudan, there's another episode of the war that erupted in, I think, 2021 with, you have the defense force on one side and you have the other paramilitary force causing a lot of suffering. Before one can say, okay, why isn't the U.S. doing more? And there's oil in Sudan and so on. There's all the minerals that Apple and all these companies need. How about, let's look at it twofold. One, what are we doing in those places, like the political apparatus within that environment? Are they organizing themselves enough to actually make a tangible difference or improve the lives of the locals? When we talk about the war and so on, clearly in that case, that is not what is happening. But that was one. But on the other side of it, how about, for example, the diaspora from those places? What are they really doing in terms of organizing themselves as a voice to influence that U.S. foreign policy towards their home country? Because, I mean, you can't blame, let's say, a U.S. government or any government for that matter if they prioritize the interest of their nation, their constituents. After all, that is how politics is supposed to function, even though one might say, well, now, the political environment in the U.S. is really beholden to financial interests and so on. Well, so that's their constituent, let's say the financial interest. But nevertheless, that is their primary job. So if you want the U.S. foreign policy to take a different direction when it comes to interaction, say, with the Congo, or to do more with Sudan and so on, well, it behooves Congolese in the United States. It behooves Sudanese in the United States. It behooves Caribbeans in the United States. If you want better interaction in terms of foreign policy with those nations, it behooves those members to organize themselves better. Okay, organize themselves better, and then be part of all the policy making agenda, the political decisions, being part of essentially have strong lobbying effort to find a way to design the narrative in a way that would make say the US elected official or the political system to understand that, you know what, by working with us, it's actually to the best interest of your constituents, of your nation as a whole. But if it's all about victimhood, well, it is not the job of the American politician to just look for the best interest of the Congolese nation or or any other nation. That is just the way it works. You might say, well, that's a bit harsh. Well, let's look at the example of APAC, for example. I think most people know what APAC is, right? The American-Israeli Political Action Public Action Committee. APAC. That's a strong lobbying arm of the Israeli government. As a matter of fact, that was created by to advance the interest of the Israeli government back in the I believe it was in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. Well, look at how powerful APAC is today, determining not only the state of affairs in Israel, but also the state of affairs in the United States, so that foreign policy decision that the United States takes benefits Israel. That's the mandate of APAC. And they have organized themselves to the point of becoming very, very powerful. If I mention the name Jamal Bowman, I think if you're in the United States and maybe you're in the Northeast, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. That is the representative who lost his primary election in the most expensive primary campaign ever, where APAC poured millions of dollars in that primary campaign to ensure that Jamal Bowman would not win that election, simply because he had criticized Israel and said that Israel was committing a genocide in Gaza. APAC pumped money and brought in another representative who ended up winning the primaries, winning that election. Now, I can assure you that APAC does not represent the voices of all Israelis. Absolutely not. No group is a monolith anyways. The same applies to Israeli. You have another group, right? The Jewish Voices for Peace, for example, JVP, which is a staunch anti-Zionist group, right? But definitely do not align at all with the approach of APAC. So this here, I'm using this example. For those, for example, might say, well, you know, at least Israel is a very united and putting funds. No, I just told you there's several different groups. You have APAC, you have JVP, and so on. So perfect unity does not exist in any group. So we can never use that as an excuse, for example, to say that Africans, we cannot organize ourselves as to form strong PACs, strong lobbyist group. No, that is not true. We can certainly organize ourselves. It takes strategy. It takes special individuals who can eliminate their self-interest and just prioritize the interests of the group, common goals. Those type of individuals to lead such effort. But it is absolutely possible. It is absolutely possible. So today, no decision is made about Israel without the express influence of APAC. That's how they've been able to position themselves over the years. Why are we not able to do that? Why haven't we done so? Brother, where art thou? Or sister, where art thou? I think the time is now. APAC, how about Global PAC? I said Global PAC was not a political affair committee, but how about Global PAC? Organizing ourselves, with certain specific goals in mind, to be advocate for the best interest of Black people, not only in the United States, but also in different regions around the world. If not Global PAC, how about different groups? But the point is, if you want the policies that the United States takes, like foreign policy, to have a better influence on different nations, well, it behooves the diaspora members within the United States to really organize themselves within strong lobbying groups, within strong PACs, and put pressure so that better decisions are made with regards to their countries. Like about 2 weeks ago, I had mentioned that, look, if we're organized well enough, the current war in the Congo would end in a heartbeat, because it's a war that is really fueled by the desire of minerals, right? And really the minerals, for example, that Apple needs for its iPhone and so on, come from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Not all of them, but you talk about coltan, tantalum, and so on. It primarily comes from the DRC. Now, granted, the DRC government had decided to sue Apple subsidiaries in France and Belgium. That was back in December, I believe. And then Apple said, well, we do not directly source our minerals from the DRC. We go through suppliers, which is, typically the argument that many of these multinational will use. Tesla tended to use the same argument as well. I know we need cobalt that comes from the DRC, but we do not buy directly from the DRC, right? We buy it from different suppliers. So that whole, swing of the Congolese government, in my sense, that's just another one of those attempts to showcase that we're trying to do something when in reality nothing significant is being done. But that whole diaspora effort is absolutely needed in terms of organization and so on. Economically speaking, well, I mean, when I talk about lobbying and organizing constituencies, that is great, but without money, that is not possible, right? So let's delve into the second aspect of this conversation. Finances. Okay, so when I started this show today, I believe I mentioned that we would talk about not just the Global PAC, not just Africa, the Caribbean, but also within the United States. So let's talk a bit about that. All right. Within the United States, a decision such as the one that Apple has made has potentially significant, I would say, possibilities, or there are opportunities for Black businesses, business owners in terms of like the supply chain and so on. But are we organized enough to be able to sit at that table, advance our interests, advocate for our businesses, so that we might participate in opportunities such as this? You have the U.S. Black Chamber of Commerce, you have other initiatives, but I have a sense that we're not forceful enough. And one of the reasons being, quite frankly, even when it comes to business, we do not weigh heavily enough. As a matter of fact, let's do this. I was reading an article right before I came online today. Let me see if I can put it on the screen here. I strongly recommend or advise you to go and look at this when we're done. This is an article about small businesses. It's from the Pew Research Center that looks at Black-owned businesses within the United States. There are great outcomes, or there's great insight from these articles. So just looking at a few numbers, quite frankly, which can be a bit depressing if you ask me, but then again, it just highlights how better, how much more work we need to do as a Black community in the United States, for example. So you look at only about 3% of U.S. businesses were African American owned in 2022, according to the U.S. Census. Only about 3% of U.S. businesses, and Black people and African American people represent about 14% of the population in the United States. But in terms of business, only 3%. So that is not very significant. There is an improvement, right? But it's still only about 3%. So we definitely need to do more. Uh, and then if you look at the sectors that Black businesses tend to operate in, so we have healthcare, we have social assistance, which tend to be the main sector. We also have sector like the retail, trade, food services, transportation, but primarily it's the healthcare and social assistance, which is by far the largest, with about 25% of Black-owned businesses. Um, there are many more insight. I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but I really recommend that you go through this article when you can at some point, just to get a better sense. But here, okay, why am I even bringing this up, right? Because look, if we want a stronger say in the policymaking arena, we need stronger lobbying and stronger influence. If we want to be also well positioned at the negotiation table when it comes to business deals and so on, we need better organization. But all of this organization relies on strong businesses and strong finances. So it behooves us to really support Black-owned businesses as much as we can. I challenge you. I mean, when was the last time you purposely decided to support a Black-owned business, or you just went and you said, "What, I want to purchase this. Let me see which Black-owned business exists that serves that distributes what I'm looking for, and let me prioritize that." If you do that, kudos to you. But many people do not necessarily do that. So I challenge you to really start incorporating that behavior so that we just together, right, increase our economic strength. There's something interesting on that article that I mentioned about the Pew Center. It's the way in which it concluded, right? So there was an interesting question that was asked in the U.S. Census that was directed at Black-owned businesses and African American majority-owned businesses. So they were asked the question to know, okay, why did they get into business in the first place? Why did they decide to own their own business? So about 87% of the people said flexible hours. About 88% of the people say that they just wanted a better way to follow their ideas and provide their own goods and services. And there's many different reasons that were provided. But surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, there was no activism reason. So in other words, none of the business owners say that they wanted to get into business just so that the Black community as a whole gets better business representation and we increase our financial muscle as a community. Nobody mentioned that. At least it wasn't a significant enough response. I personally cannot blame business owners for not mentioning that, because if you go into business for activism as your primary reason, chances are you might not succeed very well. You go into businesses because there's a niche, there's a need that you've identified, and then you see that there is a market. And so in the way in which you address that need or you address a pain point, you do it in a way that brings a lot of value and people are willing to pay for that service, right? Goods or service. That is why you go into business. You have a passion and so on, but you can deliver it in a way that is so valuable that people are willing to pay for it. That is how you succeed in a business. Now, once you're into it, it is already so hard to have a business going that if we had to put on your shoulders that added, I would say, responsibility of just ensuring that you just elevate the presence of Black people in the business, it becomes a bit much, especially when you're starting off, which is why I think it is on the side of customers, us as consumer. When I'm a business owner, and many of you that are watching might also be business owners, but when we are on the consumer side and we are wanting to purchase goods and services, let's help those businesses. So we might have more of an activism inclination. So we might purchase into that business with the idea that we want better Black representation in the business. So as consumer, I put that responsibility on us as consumers to support Black-owned businesses, advance it, so that Black representation may increase, and then ultimately we can also start having more funds to direct into grassroots political organization, into PACs and so on, with the mandate of wanting to have a seat at the table, better representation when it comes to business decisions, but also political decisions. Which is why I really strongly urge you, just take the time and make sure to incorporate that in your shopping habits and so on. It just takes a simple Google search. You go on Instagram also, you just type, Black-owned businesses in my area and the city in which you are. You will find listing almost everywhere. And just make it a point. Go and try and just, support. When it comes to your kids, incorporate that also into your family habits. Black people have come a long way in the United States. Obviously, we know the structural racism and inequality that exists in this country. We know that Black people historically were denied opportunities. Policies were created by the government to prevent Black people from accessing many opportunities. That is a historical fact. That being said, now we're in a situation where we can really work hard to overcome that. I mean, and we kind of have to anyways, if we significantly want to shift the scales with the current state of affairs. You've already seen what all the policies that Donald Trump is taking, for example, when it comes to anti-DEI measures. Even though, as I said last week, I mean, when it comes to DEI measures, it's not really just to the benefit of African Americans and Black people as a group. It incorporated other inequalities, which is fine. We want an equal society. But if we are wanting to focus on advancing the interests of Black people as a group, then it goes beyond DEI. We need all these other efforts. Support Black-owned businesses. And then let's also support political organizations that are working to try to organize our voices, reach a certain critical mass so that we can influence the state of affairs. Because if you go at it in a dispersed manner, good luck having an impact. You will not. Because we're talking about, again, rebalancing the scales. We need significant strength. So right now, in the state of affairs in the United States, so obviously the white people as a group, based on all the structural inequalities that were embedded into the political system in this country, have the advantage. Black people, we need to work really hard to work on balancing the scales. We're already seeing how people are, affirmative action was removed. So there's so many things that are being done to make it difficult and hard, but nevertheless, we need to continue working towards making this society more equal, balancing the scales, and really having that financial muscle is a need. And one way to do it, let us make it a point to support Black-owned businesses. So as this platform grows, right, the AfriKili and the Global PAC will definitely make it a point to, as much as we can, highlight Black-owned businesses in the United States, but also around the world. We'll really make it a point, because I strongly believe into that. Activism is good, but hey, money talks, BS walks. So we need to ensure that as a community, we support each other. Forget the lack of unity argument. I mean, people like to mention we're not unified. I mentioned before, did you see how APAC is strong today? And APAC is by no means representative of 100% of the Jewish voices. Absolutely not. But they're strong because people who supported them are doing so very significantly, even though there's also funds from the Israeli government, of course. We need to do the same when it comes to Black people. And then when it comes to Africa, a lot of work needs to be done. When it comes to the Caribbean, a lot of work needs to be done. When it comes to Latin America, a lot of work needs to be done locally in those nations. fighting corruption and so on. But the diaspora within the United States also need to work harder towards what's happening in those nations. And I strongly urge really participating in collaborative efforts, which is why, again, the Global PAC advances building strong coalitions. I will not, for example, avoid participating in an effort from the NAACP or from a country in which I'm not, just because I'm not from that place. No. Let's get beyond that mindset, because the issues we're trying to address are very common to people of African descent and Black people and Black communities. So let's move away from looking at the differences, but focusing on our similarities and seeing how together we can actually bring our resources together, right? Bring our strengths together, and then design solutions that end up benefiting us as a whole. And then ultimately, then we can really work on just equality in general, equity in general, right? Because we are humans at the end of the day. But in order for us to be strong enough to demand reforms that will ensure that Black people are rebalancing the scales, we need a lot of effort. All right, brothers and sisters, I will end up there for today so that I don't end up going for too long. 37 minutes already. So before concluding, right? By now, how we like concluding this show. If you followed us, you know what we do. I like bringing quotes at the end of every single show, a quote to inspire us. That's the idea of me bringing these quotes, right? It's to showcase, historical figures are important. And now, it's also Black History Month and so on, but there's also more recent history. But the larger point is to really encourage us, motivate us to continue advancing towards positivity, to not just stay in a state of complacency, but action. We're active participant of our destinies. So we have the ability to change, to demand change and positively influence the state of affairs. I strongly believe that, and that's what the Global PAC stand for. On that note, the quote that I'm bringing you today is from none other than Rosa Parks, who decided to rebel and not give up her spot on the bus in Montgomery, because the bus system obviously was segregated, and she was tired of giving up. And so in this quote, Rosa Parks says, "I had no idea that history was being made. I was just tired of giving up." Again, I had no idea that history was being made. I was just tired of giving up. So this was in response, she was being asked why she decided not to stand up and give up her seat to a white person. And it ended up causing her being, arrested and having a fine of $10 at the time. And she really said, she wasn't doing it for historical reasons. She had no idea history was being written, right? Or being made. She was just tired of giving up. And I think this is very apropos with the work that we're doing, the work that AfriKili and the Global PAC is doing. And so I really want to encourage also all of you out there, look, we can never just give up, all right? Because when you give up, you're essentially accepting defeat. And you see a status quo, a state of affairs that is unequal. Really, it behooves us to attack that and do not be satisfied with the status quo. And if we continue with that mindset, continue with that approach, what might end up happening over time is that we would be creating history, whether we know it or not, and we will reach a critical mass so that we can bring about real change or changes that we want to see. On that note, I will end up here today. Thank you very much for tuning in and watching this show once again today. I really, really appreciate all your support. Please continue sending your messages, watching, sharing. And for those of you who have not done it, let me again remind you, please click on the subscribe button, become part of the conversation, become part of this community as we're growing in 2025, because without you, we cannot do it. But guess what? I have no doubt, man, I am so motivated and convinced. I don't know how to say that. I am so energized, and I know that in 2025, the Global PAC will be on that taking off trajectory, and we will reach the goals that we set forth. I have no doubt about it, but I need your support. So click the subscribe button and join the conversation, join the community, and let's do it together. So once again, for joining in today. Before closing, let me remind you, as I always do, remember, we are a beautiful, a strong, a creative, and a capable people. We are. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. More importantly, we are the Global PAC. So until next time, peace be with you. Asante sana, which means thank you very much in Swahili. And once again, we are the Global PAC. Thank you very much.